I was asked by a Patreon this morning, and he's got a problem with his TDI, and when he turns his lights on, the temperature gauge goes to hot. That's unusual. So I thought, well, before we start getting into diagnostics and things like this, let's work out how the circuit works. Now, last week I did a video, and I'm going to put it up here, about a fuel gauge and how that worked and a few bits and pieces about that. Well, the temperature one's even simpler still. It's so simple, it's stupid. Let's go through the few principal things of the design on my crude drawing. Battery. From your battery, the power goes to your ignition switch, which would be a brown wire. Then from your ignition switch, it goes to a white wire, which goes to your fuse box, and then it will turn into a green wire, which feeds the male side of the connector of your gauge. Now, naturally, I've just done a green wire up here because I haven't got a white pen, and I'm not drawing all that circuit, but that's it in a nutshell. It goes through a fuse. From your other side, on the female, it goes all the way around to the top tab on your sender that goes into your block, into your cylinder head block, wherever it goes. And then that's grounded via the block back to your battery. Couldn't be simpler. So what can go wrong? And a few, well, not so much, let's not get into that too much, but how can you do some diagnostics to test very quickly if it's a sender or if it's a gauge problem? Well, it couldn't be simpler. Take your feed wire off here, off your temperature sender, and put it to ground. Easy. The gauge should shoot up to hot. Because the resistance is low, it'll just shoot straight to the battery and it'll go up. Now, if it doesn't do that, and we're talking about on the car itself at the moment, so on the car, put this to ground using a simple crocodile clip. If it doesn't go up, go to the gauge, go take your dash out, have a look at the back, and put a crocodile clip going from the female connector straight to ground. Your gauge should go up. If your gauge doesn't go up, it could be a faulty gauge. Naturally, what we've got to do is check if we've got voltage, 12 volts, to the back of this male connector. If we haven't got 12 volts there, well, we've got to start going backwards by looking at the wire and the fuse, see if we've got a fuse supply. But if you've got 12 volts here, and you've put this to ground, then your gauge is shot. Now, honestly, after 30 odd years of Land Rovering, I've found very, very few problems with Land Rover gauges. They've been quite reliable. They do get water in them, and the little bulb things fall out inside, but apart from that, they don't give me much trouble. Things that do give trouble sometimes are sensors and connections, always connections. So, like I say, if you put this wire to ground and your gauge doesn't go up, put a ground on here straight onto your from your female straight to ground. If it then goes up, then you know there's a problem with this blue wire here. It's actually green with a blue tracer, but I haven't got a green with a blue tracer pen. But that's it in a nutshell. It's very, very simple. So let's go and have a look now at a practical circuit, because you guys have got you're really lucky, because I haven't put my dash back in my Defender yet. So we can actually use a real-time setup and see the wiring in situ, and we're going to do an experiment. The wiring on the back of your dash here is very, very simple for the temperature gauge. All it consists of is two wires. There's one wire, the green wire, goes to the positive on the battery. The white wire I put on, the jumper, goes to the sender, which is clamped in the vise. In the vise, there's another connector that goes to ground. This is simulating your engine block, all right? And there's a reason why I've put it like that, not free floating. That's the only two wires. So if you suspect your gauge isn't working, I'll show you what to do. But that is behind here, so there's no tricks or anything like that. Now there are different types of senders on Land Rovers, on the TDIs. There's a green one and there's a black one. The black one is for the Defender, the green one is for the TDI in the Discovery 1, not the Discovery 2. So just make sure, because a lot of people are doing engine swaps and sometimes they get these mixed up. So please, Defender, the black one is for this type of gauge. That's that cleared up. Oh, wait a minute, let's do a little experiment. And I'll show you why you shouldn't use the Defender one, the Discovery one, in a Defender. I actually had the wire going straight to ground on the bench. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes to go back down again, and I'll show you something interesting while it's setting itself back up again. Early cars used to have one of these little gizmos in the back. Morris Minors, Minis, early Range Rovers, lots of British cars had this thing, and this is called a voltage stabiliser. And because in the days when you used to have dynamos and things like this, the voltage could be sort of a bit fluctuating. That's the word I'm looking for. Hey, come on, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. So this little device used to regulate 12 volt input down to 10 volt, I do believe, and then that used to go to your gauges, and it used to stabilise the voltage so that it was a steady flow of voltage to feed your gauges, if you understand. Nowadays, with alternators and things like that, we don't seem to have that problem. The voltage regulator is built in, well, not a regulator, but it's stabilised inside the gauge itself. And also these are slow response gauges. And what that means is, like for your fuel gauge, for example, it's damped down inside the gauge. So when your float's bouncing up and down, like in the old Series 1s, your gauge used to go flying up and down like this. Well, you don't need that. It'll actually balance it out here inside the gauge, so it's a nice stable reading. So now we've got our gauge gone back down to 0. I'm going to put the green one into our fake engine block, and I'm going to put the ground onto it and watch what happens. Not the ground, the feed wire. And you can see instantly that the gauge goes straight to the top. It's almost grounding, and that's because the gauges on the Discovery were completely different setup to these old style gauges. So that's not going to work. So we can take that out, get rid of that, put it back in the box. We'll let that die down again, and then we'll try the black one. Now, like I say, the circuit is very simple, so if you want to test this at home, you can do exactly the same as I'm doing for the benches. Just pull your dash out, pull all the wires out. I mean, they're so easy to get out, it's stupid. You've got a multi-plug here and 2 multi-plugs on the back. Pull all that out, set it on the bench like that, and you can't go wrong. So now we're going to test the black sender. We're going to screw it in, the thread if it will, there we go. And we're going to put the wire on and watch what happens to the gauge now. Nothing at all. So what we're going to do to simulate some heat is we're going to use the propane. Alright, so I'm going to go over the top of here like this, and I'm going to warm up the gauge, but not too. Now this is going to be quite severe, so it's not really recommended to do this. It's easy to put it in a bucket of water and warm it up, but I wanted to show you, and if I had it in a bucket you wouldn't see what was going on. These gauges, by the way, don't operate until 40 degrees Celsius, so bear that in mind too. But this is going to be an instant heat build-up, so I'm backing it off. And there you can see the gauge moving up. So I'm going to stop there. Now there's still residual heat coming in from that, and we're going to have a look through the thermal imaging camera, if we can. Let's have a look. What temperature? We've got about 30 degrees on there, and it's shot up. Now this isn't a really good experiment because the heat is too intense, if you see what I mean. That's shot up beyond its range, but obviously this would be like 80 odd degrees, so we've had a pulse of too much heat, if you see what I mean. But it just shows you that the gauge does work according to this sensor here. So I'm just going to get some water and I'm going to cool this down. So I've got my old Castrol cup and I'm going to cool down the sensor. Floor could do with a wash anyway. And you can see the slow response to go back down. It's very fast to go up, but very slow to come down. And that's its stabilisation inside, because you don't want it bouncing up and down, fluctuating all the time. So even though this water's ice cold out of the tap, it's not banging it down straight away. This could take a while. So anyway, that's the circuit I've shown you on the board. This is how it is in practice. You can't really go wrong. You know, if it was me, if I had a problem, I'd take my long jumper lead, go from the back of the switch here, all the way through the car, through the bonnet, and onto the sender on the block here, and just check and eliminate the original wire by putting the jumper across, and see if your gauge works then. It should. It really should. If it doesn't, it could be the sender. If you've changed the sender and it still doesn't do it, it's got to be the gauge or the feed wire. It can't be anything else. So I hope that helps you. And there we go. Trying to make Land Rovers better, one at a time. Sometimes it's not so easy. We'll talk to you later.